this class because I'm Southeast Asian actually.
Mm.
I'm from Bangladesh, or my parents are from Bangladesh, and it's a Muslim country, and I'm really aware of like the Islam part of the Southeast Asian religions, but I'm not that familiar with like Buddhism or like Hinduism or like other religions, and I thought it would be an interesting way to learn more because I have a little knowledge on it, but not a lot, so it would be an interesting way to learn more and educate myself. Also, my friend, she took the class with someone else, a different professor, and she really enjoyed it. So I thought it would be a really great way.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Farhana. All right. Okay, one more maybe if you want to say something. One more students, just say, yeah, your background and why you are interested in taking this course.
I could introduce myself.
Okay, please go ahead.
So I'm Shan Said. I'm a Middle Eastern Studies major. So the reason I'm taking this course is because, we know a lot about Christianity. We hear about it all the time. We hear about Judaism, Islam, but we don't really hear about what Taoism is, what Buddhism is. I might have I don't know what it is at all. So I think by taking this course, I hope to learn what all these other religions are that we might not hear about every day.
Okay, thank you, Shan. All right. Okay, you can of course, let me see. I have the slides, and I'm going to continue the slides. I'm going to introduce again Southeast Asia and what is Southeast Asia and what are some of the religions that are in Southeast Asia. Let me share my screen. Let's see. All right, not yet. Okay, I'm still. All right. I'm gonna send. Okay.
Professor, I have a quick question.
Yeah, wait. I'm right. This is the. Okay, last time we talked about what some of the religion, the definitions of religion. I hope that you remember now. There's some different definitions of what religion is. So basically, there are two major definitions. One focus on individual aspect of religion. So you basically talks about the feeling, the sentiment, the wishes, the hopes, love, spiritual expression, which is very individual, very personal. So that's one definition, really focus on psychological dimension of one particular person, expressing themselves in a religious way, in a spiritual way. So that's one broad definition of religion. Is experience, personal experience, private expression. The second broad definitions of religion is social. So in other words, religion is something social. So to be religious is to be part of a religious community. It is about being part of belonging to a church, a temple, a religious community, whatever this religion is. So you have religion as a source of social action. So one is individualized, the other one is more social, right? So that's a two broad definition of religion. All these definitions talks about the sacred. What is sacred? What is holy? What is supernatural? What is supranatural or supra-rational? So it's not so much about non-rational or irrational, but supra-rational. Some people use the term God or gods or goddess or goddesses or deities or spirits, all kind of labels that they would use for this supra-rational, supernatural or spiritual beings, right? So that's in relation to this power. It has power. This spiritual being has power. And this religion or definition of religion consider those elements. So that's just to to give you the basic definition of religion. Another way to say about religion is the sacred and the profane. You see, the sacred is something that is supernatural. I already mentioned about that. Extraordinary. The sense of you use, like amazing thing, extraordinary, memorable, momentous. So that's the sacred. The profane is the opposite of the sacred. So you have the sacred and the profane. So the sacred usually is related to what is religious, and the profane is related to the non-religious, the worldly, the profane. What are the terms that we usually use? Like ordinary, like things ordinary, business as usual, something not that important or important, but not super important, the opposite of the sacred. So you have the sacred and the profane. It's according to Mircea Eliade, one of the scholar of religious traditions, just an example, right? And then you have also dimensions of the sacred. Where does sound come from? Okay, anyway, the dimension of the sacred. In other words, religions would have some dimension. According to Ninian Smart, again, he's a scholar of religion. One is ritual. Ritual, ritual or practical dimension. Prayer in a place, ritual. We will talk about ritual later on. Something that you do repetitively, religiously, ritual, rites and ritual. Then you have a doctrinal dimension, like a teaching, like believe in God, believe in angels, believe in the hereafter. Doctrinal, like the doctrines, the teachings, the dimension of the teaching. So you have many people who worship God, but they don't really have doctrines with them all the time. Some people understand certain doctrines, but they don't do ritual a lot. So for example, so ritual and doctrinal are different. And then you have also mythic or narrative dimension. This is the stories. Like religion have stories about prophets, for example, stories about Virgin Mary, stories about Jesus, for example, stories about Abraham, for example, right? This is a narrative dimension of religion. So some religions emphasize the narrative or the mythical understanding of religion. Another aspect of dimension of the sacred is experiential. Experiential means that you experience. It's emotional dimension of it. So some people, they don't necessarily attach to a church or a temple or a mosque, but they experience the religiosity. They experience spirituality. So experience or experiential dimension of it might be quite personal. Sometimes, or many times, experiential dimension also belong to the community. So by going to the church, going to the mosque, to the temple, to the synagogue, for example, you have an experience. You experience being in a religious environment, for example. So experiential dimension is one of the dimension. Another dimension is called ethical or legal dimension. Okay, in other words, what you can do, what you cannot do, what you can eat, what you cannot eat, and so on and so forth. What can you do, for example, certain times, and what you cannot do under other times. So ethical dimension of religion, or the sacred, and legal dimension of religion, for example, law about what to do and what not to do. So that's another dimension. The other dimension of the sacred is organizational or social dimension. For example, church, right? Or the society of monks or nuns, right? The nunhood, or a priest, yeah? Organization of priests, organization of religious community, for example. So there's an organizational dimension of the sacred. I want to make it quick here, all right? But if you have any question, you can certainly do it on your on the chat. The material dimension of religion, like the building associated with the sacred, yeah? Or, you know, we talk about the building like mosque or church, but also material like scripture. A certain object can be sacred. Materiality of this object is not simply about this is an ordinary object, but it can be sacred. So the object can be sacred. And this is the material dimension. It could be buildings, but it could be also, for example, rosary, you know, or anything, scripture, considered sacred by the religious people. An artistic dimension of it, because you have a beautiful artistic, you know, churches or temples or mosque or things like that. So artistic and material dimension of the sacred. Lastly, but not the least, is political dimension of religion. Some religions become political. In Southeast Asia, Buddhism and nationalism in Thailand, for example, are really, you know, to be Thai is to be Buddhist, for example, or to be Malay in Malaysia is to be Muslim, you know, and certain places, religion and nationality and politics are integrated. But in other cases, political dimension is in the form of political parties. You have some political parties being inspired by religious teachings, right? So those are the dimensions, different dimensions of the sacred, according to Ninian Smart. Ritual, teachings, myth and narrative, experience, ethics, organizations, materiality, and politics. Yeah. By now, I hope that you can have a broad understanding what religion generally is. In general, we will talk more about the specificity later on. All right. I'm gonna see again, why the chat thing is gone now. I have to see the chat. All right. Oh, here we go. All right. Yeah. Would you put this together as the holy book, like the Quran or the Bible? Yeah. Okay. I suggest. Okay. Now Southeast Asia. What is Southeast Asia? I want to ask some of you, what countries are Southeast Asia? Anyone?
Indonesia.
More?
Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, the Philippines,
Thailand, Vietnam,
Uh-huh.
Malaysia,
Malaysia,
Singapore,
Singapore,
Burma.
Burma,
Cambodia,
Cambodia, right? Thailand. Yeah. If you go to Thai restaurant, you don't know Thailand is Southeast Asia? Well, anyway, Thailand, you mentioned Laos, Cambodia, Brunei is small monarchy. And the last one, the youngest one is Timor-Leste in the East Timor. It used to be part of Indonesia, but then it becomes an independent state, Timor-Leste. So you see the map, right? So some mention about Bangladesh, India, and others. They are considered South Asia, but and East Asia, China, Japan, and Korea. Okay, so East Asia, China, Japan, Korea, including Taiwan, that's East Asia. Then you have South Asia, India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and then you have Southeast Asia, part of Asia, but it's more toward, if you have the map, it's below China and India. So you have Burma, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, Brunei, Singapore, Timor-Leste, and the Philippines. Now they are under nations organization. It's called Association of Southeast Asian Nations, like European Union. So they have that 11 countries. But even though you talk about Bangladesh, India, and in Sri Lanka, for example, they are part because they also influence the cultures, the religions of India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, even Pakistan influence Southeast Asia. Okay, influence Southeast Asia. Also, religions from East Asia, meaning religions from China, Korea, Japan, Taiwan, those religions and cultures also have impacts on the religions in Southeast Asia. But when I say Southeast Asia, we will cover mostly these countries that I will mention later on. Mainland Southeast Asia and island Southeast Asia. In Southeast Asia, you have certain characteristics. They are very diverse, yeah? Race and ethnicity, there are hundreds of ethnic groups in this region. Race like we call it Asian, but they are also very, very diverse. And Southeast Asian is not race, but you have Chinese as a race, and Indian as a race, and Malay as a race, for example. And you have ethnic groups in this region. Ethnic groups or ethnicity, like Javanese, Malays, Tagalogs, Khmer, for example, Thai. Even in Thailand, you have many diverse ethnic groups. In Cambodia, you have Cham, for example, and many other ethnic groups. So it's very diverse. Languages, so diverse. Don't expect to know all these languages, all right? Because it's so diverse and many of them. So you have very diverse languages. Gender and sexuality. We tend to see gender and sexuality, men and women, female and male. But in Southeast Asia, you have third genders, for example. You have, trans and so on and so forth. And it's really also very diverse. Gender and sexuality. Politics, of course. You have nation states, yeah. Many non-socialist countries. Some are socialist. Socialist countries used to be Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, but then you have non-socialist countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, and others as well. So politically, it's very diverse. Religiously, we will talk more about that. Culturally, also very diverse. So it's like a diversity, but also unity in the sense that they now create this organization called Association of Southeast Asian Nations. So unity and diversity. Linguistically speaking, this is part of the Austronesian languages. So Austronesian languages, but it is very, very diverse. One of the characteristics of Southeast Asia is rice. The very importance of rice. Many were or still are farmers, agriculturists. So rice is a very important subsistence for many people, but also help us understand why rice is almost always in the ritual in Southeast Asia. So rice becomes, for example, part of the offerings. If people in Southeast Asia want to appease gods, they would also provide rice. Apart from banana or other fruits like papaya and other things, rice is almost always there because rice is the main subsistence for many people in Southeast Asia. In terms of the climate, it's a tropical. Yeah, it's tropical. So you have a rainy season and dry seasons and tropical. And it's most of the time is, if you happen to be in Southeast Asia, you will find like humidity You're being humid, you know, like you sweat. Yeah, you sweat if you go there. You are out of the airport, you feel like, oh, this is something else. You know, if you come from United States or from four-season countries, Southeast Asia is quite different. Is it tropical? And that's why you have natural beauty and biodiversity. So it's one of the very diverse in terms of the you know, fish and flora and fauna. Maybe you have heard about orangutan, right? Orangutan, yeah, that's in Borneo, in Kalimantan, just an example. You have Komodo, for example, the giant lizard. You only find in Southeast Asia. Of course, there are other things as well. So to make it short, Southeast Asia is a very diverse and beautiful region that the world knows. And that's why religions have to be understood within the context of geography and the nature that we know, the environment, that we will talk more again later on. So nations that are under Southeast Asia, this is here. So mainland Southeast Asia, maritime or island Southeast Asia. Mainland Southeast Asia, meaning you have the mainland, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Burma, and Thailand, okay? And then island Southeast Asia, meaning you have islands, many islands, 1,000 islands, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, Brunei, the Philippines, and Timor-Leste. Indonesia, for example, has 17,000 islands. Currently 17,000 islands. So that's a lot of islands, right? Of course, the biggest one are inhabited, but many of the smaller islands, you might know Bali, B-A-L-I. Yeah, you may have heard about Bali. Is it like Hawaii or something? So it's one of the islands in Southeast Asia. This is one small island, mostly Hindu, although the majority of Indonesian are Muslims, but most of the Balinese or people in Bali are Hindus. And Bali is one of the islands, just to give you a sense of, this is an archipelago. Yeah, it's an archipelago. So imagine that, an archipelago. All right, so that's nation. So if you see the map here, I hope this is the, so you have Indonesia here, right? That's mentioned in Indonesia. And then you have Malaysia, the green here. You have Malaysia, right? Then you have, this is called island, right? This is island Southeast Asia because you have all the islands. The Philippines also have many, the Philippines has many islands here. So it's, you know, you have Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, and East Timor here. So that's island Southeast Asia, okay? Island Southeast Asia. But you have mainland Southeast Asia. You have here Vietnam, right? This is Vietnam. And then Cambodia. You have Thailand. You have Laos between Vietnam and Thailand. And you have Burma with the borders with India and China. So you have China and India are, you know, you see here East Asia and South Asia, okay? India is part of South Asia, and then China is East Asia, and then you have Southeast Asia below India and China in the map. So you have mainland Southeast Asia here, consider mainland Southeast Asia, and then island Southeast Asia. That's the two general parts that you can imagine if you talk about religions also later on. All right. Okay. So far, so good. Yeah. Right. Let's continue. So in terms of the peoples, yeah, those are countries, right? Countries. How about the peoples? You name the peoples in Southeast Asia ethnically, usually, like Thai or Chams or Lao or Karen or Burmese or Malays or Buginese or Filipino or Singaporeans. Singaporean is not really ethnic, you know, it's more a country, but they consider themselves as Singaporeans as a national identity. But in terms of ethnic groups, as I mentioned, there are a lot of ethnic groups. Javanese, Sundanese, Buginese, you know, I know this sounds to you foreign terms, but they are the peoples. They are the names that the people themselves give to themselves. All right. So here, someone ask question? Hi. Okay. Do you have a question? Who? Anybody? No? All right. Okay. Maybe just, what's this? This is the chat. All right. Okay. Historically speaking, Southeast Asia has been divided into the pre-colonial times, colonial times, and post-colonial times. Yeah. So pre-colonial times before the colonial arrivals, like the French, the Spanish, the Portuguese, Americans, Dutch, the British. Any of you knows which countries in Southeast Asia colonized by the French before?
Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos.
Yep. Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. What? Somebody? I cannot really hear you clearly. The second one? Yeah, that's fine. How about the Spanish?
The Philippines.
Right, the Philippines. And also part of, part of eastern part of Indonesia, but the Philippines, the major country that was colonized by the Spanish. But Portuguese also. Portuguese came in 1500, 1500 in Kalimantan, in Borneo, in Malacca, part of the Malaysia today. And then you had also East Timor. East Timor was mostly by the Portuguese. And American came to where? Which country?
Also the Philippines.
The Philippines, right? So after the Spanish, then the Americans. So you have the Catholic first, and for many centuries, several centuries, and then you had American early 20th century become Protestantized. That's why Catholicism and Protestant denominations become quite strong in the Philippines. But anyway, the Dutch and the British came to the archipelago, the island Southeast Asia, today's Malaysia, Indonesia, and also Brunei and Singapore. So the Dutch and the British divided this region, the islands, into two: Indonesia belonging to the Dutch colony, and then Malaysia belonging to the British. And that's then Singapore became independent from Malaysia, and then they become another new state, Singapore. Then you have Brunei, used to be also a British colony, and become an Islamic monarchy. So colonization play a role in shaping Southeast Asian cultures, including, I will mention later on, religions. So Christianity in particular was brought by these colonial powers, but also missions. Many missions from different countries, including these colonial powers, also came to Southeast Asia. That's why Christianity is, I mentioned with IS, plural. You have Christianities also become embedded in many cultures in Southeast Asia. All right, after the colonizations ended, you had post-colonial state, right? So some become socialist country under communism, like Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. But others become non-socialist, meaning they are not particularly, socialist. They were not part of the communism, global communisms. But we'll talk more about that. So that's when we talk about colonization. In Southeast Asia, you have different religions, but it is very important for us to understand indigenous religions. Yeah, before the coming of world religions, before the coming of Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, Confucianism, and others, you have people already embracing their own religious traditions, and they are religious, and they are, what we call as belongings to religious traditions. We'll talk more about that. All right, to give you a sense of the religions in Southeast Asia, I have here a small slide to give what religions are in Southeast Asia. So the red is Buddhism, yeah? So you have Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Myanmar, and then, okay, that's, so you have the red Buddhism, then you have Islam, the Catholicism in, okay, hopefully this is Google Earth. So you see Islam, Catholicism in the Philippines on the right side of, okay. So this is the most common religion in each Southeast Asian country. Yeah. In other words, the majority religions, the most the predominant religions in each country. All right. So you can follow that. Map. And then you have this. The red one is animism, the indigenous religions. And then animism is penetrated by world religions, different religions coming with different colors representing different religions. So year 350, So as you can see here now, the colors are change, right? The color change. Now you have different religions dominating different places. Islam, Buddhism, Christianity, right? And Hinduism and Buddhism were part of all these countries, but they are not part of the major religions in any of these countries. So Buddhisms in particular would become part of the major religions in mainland Southeast Asia. Buddhism become, the dominant religion in mainland Southeast Asia, Thailand, Burma, Laos, Cambodia, for example. Of Vietnam, partly also Confucian, Buddhist also, and of course other religions. Then you have Christianity in the Philippines, Roman Catholicism in particular, and then you have Indonesia, 87% of them are Muslims, Malaysia, about 60% of Muslims, Singapore, you have a mix of religious traditions. So this is just to give you a sense that the composition of religions change over time. That's the point. Composition of religion change over time. From indigenous religions or animism, some scholars say, I'll talk more about animism later, indigenous religions, but all these indigenous religions were replaced by world religions coming from different places. Yeah, so that's why Southeast Asia becomes so diverse, because of the arrival and the coming, the penetration of world religions through travels, through colonization, through mission, and so on and so forth. But indigenous religions survive in many places. That's why we need to talk about indigenous religions as well as world religions like Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, and others. Okay, this is the point that I'm trying to make, that history changes and religions are not always there. The same religion also are not always there. Different religions predominate different regions in Southeast Asia. It is therefore very important to understand history. Yeah, that's why we need to understand history in order to understand the current situation of religion. All right, somebody, let me check anything. All right. All right. So this is Buddhists in Indonesia, in Thailand. I'm trying to. Okay, not this one. All right. Okay, this is the one. Let's see this again. Another video about Southeast Asian cultures. All right. I think that to me it's very nice to give you, you know, some perspective, especially the nature, the geography, the peoples, before we focus on the religious traditions. And I think that's hopefully helps, you know, you have in your mind how beautiful, how diverse the nature of Southeast Asia. So when it talks about Christianity or Buddhism or Confucianism, it's very general, very broad, because in Southeast Asia, it's very local. When we talk about Islam, people associate Islam with Arabs, you know, the Arabs, the Middle East, very true. It's very important, and there's a center of Islam in the Middle East. But in Indonesia, for example, Islam becomes Indonesianized. Islam becomes local religion. In Malaysia, Islam becomes Malay Islam. In Singapore, some Muslims also there. In Thailand, Buddhism is different from, for example, Buddhism in India or in Japan or in China, for example. Thai Buddhism is quite specific to Thailand. Burmese Buddhism, Cambodian Buddhism. Christianity or Roman Catholicism, for example, a Roman Church is unified across the globe, but in Philippines, there's something unique about being Christian, being a Catholic in the Philippine context. Filipino Catholicism, Filipino Christianity has many unique or characteristics. Hinduism, coming from India, for example, in Bali, it becomes Balinese Hinduism. Islam in Java becomes Javanese Islam, and so on. So to make it short, religions outside or from outside the religion becomes local, become embedded in the cultures of the people. That's why you have the interaction between cultures and the religious a lot in Southeast Asia. Another way to describe religions is elite and popular levels of religion. The elitist or the elite and popular level of religion in the textbook, popular religion in Southeast Asia, here, right, you have the focus on the popular religion, how ordinary people believe and practice religion, protect themselves from illness, to make sure that their crops grow, to have a fertility in the lands, to be or to have a business, successful business, to have a magical power, for example, to be invincible, you cannot be seen, and so on. So all kind of reasons why become religious, why people become religious. In the rice field, in the markets, in the homes, and so on and so forth. They are not necessarily scriptural. They are not necessarily textual in their religious or doctrinal. They don't exactly understand, or maybe they don't feel that they need to understand the concept of God or the concept of prophets or the concept of or the scriptures. The people become religious for their own reasons and their own localities. Sometimes religious identity is not a very important thing. They don't feel like I'm a Christian, I'm a Muslim, they just simply being religious and in their own ways. So religious identity sometimes doesn't really matter among the ordinary people. Gender boundaries like men and women, separation or segregation, sometimes among the ordinary people, they cross the boundaries, you know. So it's more in a way egalitarian society. among the people, the ordinary people in Southeast Asia, being religious is just being yourself. And then you don't have to always be in boxes, that people put into you. So this is what is called popular level of religion. Is in the opposition, it's in the opposite side of the elite religions, the religions of the church, of the mosque, of the temples. Sometimes a man dominating the organizations. They have scriptures, they have books or holy scriptures. That's an elitist, the scriptural. But the people themselves sometimes don't have with them the scriptures. They become religious in their own ways, traditionally, and they keep the way they do like that. So this is what this book is about: elitist or elite and popular levels of religion. The religions that are taught by the elite people, the priests, the organization, the authorities, and the people themselves who believe and observe religions, or practice religion in their own ways, regardless of the elitist understanding. Oh, that's not religious, that's not Christian, that's not an Islamic thing, that's not according to the doctrine, that's not according to the books, for example. But that's the elitist, the doctrinal, textual, scriptural, orthodox understandings of religions. But the people, many times, as the books show, observe and become religious without necessarily relying on the books or the text. You see the points about elites and the popular levels of religion, right? This is how the book is talked about. But the chapters and the readings that I gave to you encompass all kind of religious dimension, not only the popular. Yeah, I also give you some scriptural understanding of a textual, doctrinal understanding of religion for each of the religion we talk about. Okay, we'll talk more about both elite and popular religions in the course, and also in the readings that you will have. So popular religion, to be short, whatever ordinary people believe and practice, as opposed to official elite orthodox religion. Yeah, in which case it can be said to have been around as long as have civilization or complex stratified society. But whatever ordinary people believe and practice, as opposed to official elite orthodox religion. That's what this book defines as a popular religion. Popular religion, the religion that is popularly practiced by the people. Okay.
Quick question. Can popular religion also be the elite religion?
That's a very good question. So the elite and popular are not really always clear, right? It's not like either or thing. So the popular religion becomes elite or elitist when there is some strong, organization. Yeah, it evolves, right? Popular religion becomes evolved and change, and then becomes so strict, and then only some people, holding the authority to tell you what is right, what is wrong, right? Then it becomes elite, right? So when popular religiosity becomes elite, becomes textual, becomes codified, like you have a book or like a set of teachings or doctrine that you have to memorize and do, that becomes elitist, because the popular don't necessarily rely on the books or on the authority. They rely on themselves, on their families, on the elderly peoples. They are quite egalitarian. Sometimes the elitist is not quite egalitarian. They make boundaries, right? Boundaries between sex, between genders, between the knowledgeable, the educated and non-educated, between the rich and the poor, right? So these elitists sometimes make this division, but the popular, they just practice the way they do without necessarily relying on the elite. But to answer your question again, the popular religion can be an elitist when it is codified, organized, structuralized, and authority, when you have authority, like a central or centralized. Yeah. When we talk about popular religion, it's also about popular Islam, popular Christianity, popular Buddhism, popular Confucianism, popular Hinduism. So in other words, Hinduism or Hindu beliefs and practices that the ordinary people practice, they might have priests, local priests, right? But the priests sometimes don't really matter in terms of they practice. They need the priests in certain time according to their needs. But most of the time, such, for example, in Bali, yeah, in Bali, they don't necessarily go to India in order to say this Hindu tradition is orthodox or not orthodox, right or wrong. They just do, according to their local practice. So that's a very good question. According to this book, and elitist and popular are different, but they don't necessarily always opposed to each other. It depends on the context. We will talk more about that. Very good question. All right. So in Hinduism, you have Bali, right? The island of Bali. Just an example, Hinduism in Bali. An old lady, she gives an offering to the temple. This is a local temple. And in Bali, you have temples in almost every house. Yeah. In other words, you have a community temple and you have also household temple. In other words, you have temples for your own homes. And then you have the bigger temples outside. So you have, family related temples, and you have community temples. Just an example. You have also festivals, of course. Religious festivals where you have the community engaged in the festival. This is Bali, just a small island of Bali. And Borobudur. This is one of the Buddhist temples in Southeast Asia, famous, besides Angkor Wat, another temple. This is Buddhist temple in Java, in Yogyakarta. We will talk more about this later on. We'll talk about Buddhism. And Angkor Wat, yeah, in Cambodia. This is Buddhist monks in the temple of Borobudur, and Thai monks, they're receiving alms. So people, Buddhists, would give alms to the monks, and this is one of the practice of called merit making. So you have Buddhists, ordinary Buddhists would give something like food or anything to the monks so that they can accumulate merits. Yeah, it helps them to also get enlightened in their own ways. We'll talk more about that later on. In Thailand, you have Islam also as a minority religion. So Thailand is a Buddhist majority country, but you also have Muslim, Christians, Catholics, Hindus also in Thailand. So that's why we will talk about religions as majority religion and religion as minority religion in different contexts. Yeah, we will talk more about that. This is one of the mosques. Yeah, one of the mosques in Southeast Asia. It's called the Mosque of Independence in Indonesia. It's one of the biggest mosques. This particular mosque was the architect or designed by a Christian. So a Christian architect designed a mosque, and that's something that's what we have in Southeast Asia. And this mosque is side by side with a cathedral, the Roman Catholic Cathedral. I don't have a picture here, but if you Google it, you have many religious buildings, side by side. Yeah, Hindu temples and mosques and Roman Church, Roman Catholic Church, and so on, Buddhist temples and mosques and so on. So you have a tradition of diversity and tolerance in many parts of Southeast Asia, side by side. This is a Muslim, just an example. And you, of course, Confucian Confucianism, Chinese religions, the majority of this of Chinese in Southeast Asia are Confucian or Taoist, or some also convert to Christianity. So Chinese Christians, Chinese Buddhists, but also Chinese Confucian and Muslim, also Chinese Muslims in Southeast Asia. So we'll talk again about that. This is the cathedral that I mentioned earlier. So this cathedral, Roman Catholic Cathedral, is located side by side, so just across the mosque, the mosque that I showed you before. So side by side, Muslims and Christians, they pray in their own houses of worship without any problem. Now that we are under the very, very difficult circumstances under the coronavirus, the COVID-19, I just took these pictures to give you a sense. You have Muslim women here in a school, in Islamic school, wearing the mask. It is just recent picture. Which is quite interesting, right? So they still are not socially distant; they are physically close, but they wear the mask to cover, of course, to protect themselves from the germs, from the virus. But this is an example. Disease like the coronavirus also plays a role in changing certain practices, religious practices in Southeast Asia. You see monks also, they have to wear the mask to protect themselves in Bangkok. And while you are doing the offering, you also have to protect yourself. So you see here, being religious doesn't mean that you are non-scientific. Doesn't mean that you are, you don't care about the health. You don't care about the disease and so on. Being religious also doesn't necessarily, make you only believe in God would protect you, just rely on God or your spirits and so on, and you don't do anything, but you still do something in order to protect your physics, your physicality, your bodies, your health, while they are still religious. This is the relationship between religion and science, religion and health, right? That's another topic, of course. This is just a contemporary thing to talk about. Of course, you can write about that if you're interested in that. How religious peoples have responded to the COVID-19. That's another topic of research. But anyway, to give you a sense that even when we talk about religions, we can also relate religions to other things. Yeah, this is just an example of things that we can talk about in your essays as well. All right, now it's 9, okay, 9:05. I believe I should have a break. I have to drink somewhere here. Usually in a real meeting, we have break like 10 minutes or something, right? Especially for 1 hour and 20. I cannot just talk for the whole 1 hour, 20 minutes. You can ask questions in your chat, in the chat, okay? So I'm reading some of you. Animism, all right. There's a question about animism. I will talk after this, yeah? I know I mentioned animism before, but I will focus on animism in my next slides, okay? Good. I just mentioned it. This is still my slide on introduction, on the syllabus. I haven't really go into I just mentioned here and there some terms and some concepts, but I will explain those terms after this, okay? Good. What else, the question? All right. The better term is indigenous religions, yeah. Yeah, the book says that there are issues referring to it as animism. Yep, I'll talk more about that. Jainism, okay, some of you mentioned about Jainism. I teach Jainism in my other class. It's called Asian Religions. I teach also a lower division course. so Introduction to Asian Religions, where I include Jainism. Okay, so Jainism is very important and very strong tradition. But in Southeast Asia, they are minorities. They don't become part of the major religions in Southeast Asian countries. But you do have giant temples, giant communities across Southeast Asia. If you are interested in Jainism in South Asia, I can give you some sources. But because of the upper division class, I have to limit the religions that I cover. So I only include indigenous religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Christianities, Confucianism, and then religious movements. Not that Jainism and even Baha'ism or Sikhism, Sikh, also very important. Yes, Sikhism. I include Sikhism in my other class, but unfortunately I cannot include this in our course this time. Okay, but that's all right. I can give you the sources if you are interested in those religions: Jainism, Sikhism, Baha'ism, even Judaism. Even there's some Jewish communities in Southeast Asia. Okay, local and also foreign foreign peoples who come to Southeast Asia as Jewish, and then they're also part of the communities in Southeast Asia. But unfortunately, I cannot include Judaism in our Southeast Asian religions this time. But that doesn't mean that they don't exist and that they are not important. They are also very important to learn and to study. Okay, let me talk about indigenous religions now, okay? Because some of you already raised the question about that. All right. And some of you asked if I also post my slides on Island. I will post the slides on Islands, okay? So you don't have to write down the slides because I will post them later on. Let's talk about indigenous religions. All right. So first of all, we talk about myth. Yeah, sometimes myths and stories are very important, like folk tales, legends, folklore, narratives about ancestors, about the origins of the universe. Yeah, myth, stories.
Professor,
Yep.
how you
Go
doing
ahead.
today, brother?
Say it again. Oh, it stopped. So considering the early history of a people, explaining some natural social phenomena, and some of the myths involve supernatural beings or events. And then the myths are sometimes in the paintings, in the sculptures, in music, in dance, sometimes in writings, and so on and so forth. Indigenous religions usually have such myths, like stories about the origins of the universe, like the first place or like the ancestors, right? Some indigenous religion do have this myth. But most of these myths are transmitted orally, mouth by mouth, right? Parents, grandparents transmit the myth to their children, but they don't have books. They don't have texts. That's why many of these indigenous religions are oral, non-textual, non-scripturals. They don't have the Bibles. They don't have the Quran. They don't have Bhagavad Gita, for example. They don't have Tripitaka, the three baskets of the Buddhist scriptures, for example. They don't have this text in written form. Indigenous religions also, most of the time, nomadic or remote in hills. Sometimes they're called hill tribes or hill or remote people. They are isolated in some ways. Of course, they are more and more into the world now, but in the early times, most of them are isolated in their own localities, in villages, in the hills, in the mountains. That's why people consider them ethnics or tribal, right? It's from outside. These terms are from outside. Tribal people, right? Tribal religion, ethnic religions. They don't have founders. They don't have like Jesus. They don't have Muhammad. They don't have the Buddha as the founder, because it's transmitted generation by generations and not associated with a particular personality or particular figure, no founder that we can trace. No written statements of faith. Yeah, like 5 pillars of God, like 4 noble truths in the Buddhist tradition, 4 noble truths. Or in Islam, 5 pillars of Islam, like prayer, fasting, pilgrimage, no written statements of faith. Indigenous religions also are very diverse because they are localized. They are not connected to outside peoples. There are so many hundreds of thousands indigenous religions. They are generally non-missionary. They don't tell people you have to become like us, like you have to convert to my religion, for example. They are not, generally speaking, not missionary. They don't have a mission to, to do, like go out and then make other tribes to become like them. Yeah. So indigenous religions most of the time are non-missionary. They don't have monuments. Monuments like buildings to memorize things, generally speaking. So these are some of the characteristics of indigenous religions. And then you have indigenous myth that will talk about origins of the world, instructions for constructing tools or temporary buildings, or hunting. Many of these indigenous religions consider hunting as the main, job for the man in particular. That's why they head hunting. Among the tribes that we will consider, they used to hunt heads. So head hunting is one of the practices in one of several of the indigenous traditions that I will mention again later on. Stories that recount the deeds of ancestors. They have the myths about what the ancestors did. They also, of course, have codes of conduct, what to do, what not to do, but not necessarily in text. They tell, the parents tell the children what to do, and also what you cannot do, like prohibitions, certain thing, prohibitions that you cannot do, you cannot eat, you cannot touch, and so on and so forth, but not in written form. They have rituals. Their rituals usually concern when someone is born, like birth, and then someone has reached maturity, like initiation ritual, like when you become a boy, there's a ritual related to that, and then you get married. That's a marriage, a wedding, and then you die, and the funeral. So the rites of passage is called the rite de passage in French. Rite of passage is a cycle of life that they would have rituals related to that. From birth to death. So indigenous tradition usually have these rituals, yeah? And then metaphysically, they believe in spirits, the spirits or gods, different names, local names, and then they sing or they recite spells or charms, prayers in order to appease evil spirits, if they believe in the evil spirits, or they also want to please the spirits and the good spirit, want the protections. So they pray so that the good spirit would protect them, and then they pray to the evil spirit so that the evil spirit doesn't harm them. So it's about protection, about safety, about security, about fertility of the soil where they can grow their crops and harvest, right? So indigenous traditions, oftentimes, they relate this everyday life thing to the spirits. The material objects have souls, have spirits. Either the material object themselves are life or spiritual, or the spirits dwell in the objects. Yeah. So either the object themselves are like soul, so there's a soul in the objects, like life, like living. There is not such thing as dead thing or material objects, materialism. On the other hand, you also have the belief among the indigenous peoples, spirits dwell in the mountains, spirit dwell in the houses, spirit dwell in the trees, spirit dwells in the village, spirit dwells in certain places considered sacred, and so on and so forth. So this is, some suggest animism. That's why the term animism, which is problematic, animism, animo means spirit. In other words, everything has spirit. So I will talk more about animism later on. So fetishism. Fetishism is a term also outside, is an object, an inanimate object for magical powers. So fetishism, worship of an inanimate object for its magical powers, or because it is inhabited by a spirit. Fetish, the term of fetish. But you have shaman, shaman. I hope that you understand this term shaman. Well, shamanism is basically a spirit medium. You can make some spirit medium, intermediation between spirit world and human world. So shaman is someone who speaks to you as intermediation, as intermediary, as a medium between you humans and the spirits. So shaman is someone who talks to the spirits and talks to you humans. Yeah. So a shaman is a human before, but when he turns into shaman, he's transformed himself. That's why the train situation. Sometimes he speaks differently. The sounds would be quite different, and even generally speaking, this shaman is neither man nor female. So it's a third gender. Many of the shamans turn into the third gender, neither male nor female. When he or she, we can talk, we talk they here, they turn into shaman, they speak to the humans and they speak to the spirits. Okay? Shamanism, intermediation, medium between the spirit and the humans. Totem or totemism later on, usually an object, a sacred object, magical object, representing some animals like cow, like crow, like crocodiles, like anything that they consider sacred, holy, and they have a totem, but also represent plants and some cases natural phenomena like lightning or I think. But totem is another term that scholars give. Other terms that we talk about, oh, I already end actually 9:20 now. I don't realize I have to stop. Ah, man. All right, let me have a drink. Okay, we'll continue lecturing this next week. But before I end, for your weekly essays, some ask me about what is the due date, right, for the essays. normally I put the due date for those, like due dates. But this time, as long as you can write 5 weekly essays, right? But one by one, please, so I can, for example, just an example. This next week, you write one first weekly essay, okay? The first weekly essay, please turn next week, any time, any day, next week. Let's say something about the reading that you already read from the introduction, Southeast Asian religions or indigenous religion. You can talk, for example, I want to talk about indigenous religion. I want to talk about animism. I want to talk about Southeast Asia, for example. I want to write something about things that I already explained in the webs in the PowerPoint, for example. 2-3 pages for the undergraduate, and then I think 3 pages for the graduate students. What is your thought about that? Yeah, your response to that. You can explain the readings, what you learn from the reading, what is the argument, what is the ideas in the readings. You can also, after you explain the readings, you can comment on that. I agree with that, I don't agree with that, why are you agree, and so on and so forth. So there is no specific format for your essay, for your response essays, okay? As long as you give your thought about the readings, okay? 2 pages, 3 pages, double space, I think you will be okay. And that's for the first assignment, I would say, I would expect from you. The first weekly essay that you will write about the readings on Island, already I put them. Or maybe the first or second chapter of the book, yeah? Or from the slides that I have, but I hope that the readings would be more engaging. The slides that I give to you are mostly general and try to clarify certain terms, summarize the readings and so on. So I hope my slides also will be useful for you. If you have any questions about the slides, about the PowerPoints, about anything, just email me, right? I will stop sharing, and I wanna talk to you. I know it's already, we can end this, but if you have any question, you can go ahead. Where is it? All right. Any question here? Okay, pick 5 weeks, and all right, that's already clear. You have to turn in an essay next week. Yeah, I would say I encourage you to do that next week, because it's gonna be difficult for you to write all your essays later on when you also have the critical essays, the critical analysis essay, 4-5 pages. So before you write about the 4-5 pages essay, I would encourage you to start writing your weekly essays, the 5 essays that I chose. So you can, you can start next week. That will be, that will be nice for you also to do gradually rather than do the whole things later on. Okay, for the attendance, I will, all right, I will, okay. I will save the chats. Can you write something, anything at all in your chats? Maybe a question, maybe a comment, and then I will save the chat so that I can see that you are present, you are participate. You came to the meetings, and anything at all. You just hear something. So, yep. Nathaniel, right? Sharon, yep. So I see you now. So please just write your name or anything at all you say there, so I can save this and as a point for attendance. Yeah. As a proof of attendance. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm here. I'm still here. If you want to continue, it's fine. Even though we formally end the session, but if you still have a question, I'm here still.
Do you hear me?
Yeah. Is it Ryle? Right?
What's up? You guys had the same class at the same time. Like, you guys could sit next to each other in the class and all that. That's what you mean, right?
This is the first class we did this online.
Oh, so
anytime-
before at school you didn't have this?
No. Just because right now it's online.
Oh, boy.
Professor, did you mention that you would put your lectures online?
Yeah, I will
They
do
would
that.
be under. Okay.
Yeah, I will post the Zoom videos on Island. Yeah. Okay. Oh, let's see. Why is this private? I know to everyone. Let's see how to send thing everyone. Let me see. Everyone publicly. I will post the Zoom videos on Island. Is it everyone to everyone or no? No?
No.
Okay.
No.
Let me see, okay? Let me do this again. I'm trying to write a message to all of you.
Make sure it says everyone, Professor.
Yeah, I know. Everyone public and public. Participant can chat. Okay. Where is that? I'm trying. Used to be there, but that's why it's okay. Okay, let me check. Where's the chat?
You click down at the bottom again where the chat is.
Yeah, I press this, okay? Hi, Tara. So here I have type message here, but only to person that oh, okay, now I got it. Everyone, all right. I found it, all right. Hi, everyone, okay?
Yes.
I will post the PowerPoints and the Zoom videos on iLearn or something, I think. Right?
You know where to get good jambalaya at?
Okay. Okay. Now I stop recording. Post. Okay. Oh, I want to save first. Save chat. All right. Okay. It's safe. The chat is saved. The chat has been saved, so I can see all your names later on.
Okay.
Right. All right. I think that's all for now, right? Anything else?
Yes, Professor.
Yep. Who's speaking?
Kenya DeSoto.
Okay.
I wanted to clarify for the essay. Do you want us to turn it in before class, or what is the time?
There is no time. There is no specific time because this basically you just submit on Island, right? So next week, maybe Thursday of next week, Thursday would be okay. Friday also is fine. So I don't have any specific due dates. So as long as anytime next week, you can write that and submit that, you'll be fine. That will be the first essay that you submit.
And it would be about the reading. We pick a reading, right?
Yes, go to the readings, select the readings.
Can we mention your Zoom lectures?
Say it again.
Can we
Linda.
Can we mention your lecture in the essay?
Readings. I would prefer readings. Of course, you can organize your thought from the lectures and stuff. but you can well, if you read both readings and my lectures, you can make some connection, for example. But don't just comment on my lectures on, you have to find one of the readings, because the point is about engaging with the readings and lectures. So I will see, and I will let you know if I can only see my lectures but not the readings.
All right, and sorry, I also wanted to ask you if you started class on Tuesday or if it was just the syllabus, because I just signed up for the class today.
Oh yeah, that's fine. Tuesday, I will post the video from Tuesday.
All right, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Awesome. Thank you, Professor. See you next week.
Thank you. Okay, see you next week. Bye.
Professor?
Yes?
Oh, sorry. I forgot to ask you. Same thing. I just added the class.
Yeah.
And I haven't gotten the syllabus yet, but so the essay is just gonna be based on the readings. You just want us to reflect on it, and give our opinion?
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
that what you're looking for?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I got it. Okay. Thank you.
Yep. You're welcome.
Good night.
Good night.